1 in 10 pioneers who stepped onto the Oregon Trail never made it out alive. 30,000 bodies buried in shallow graves, one corpse every 50 yards for 2,000 miles. The lucky ones got wooden markers, most just disappeared beneath the prairie, their bones scattered by wolves before the next wagon train rolled through. Here's what life was really like on the Oregon Trail. Not the sanitized version from your school textbooks, but the brutal day-to-day struggle that nearly 500,000 Americans faced between 1840 and 1860 as they gambled everything on the promise of free land in Oregon Territory. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button if these historical bedtime stories help you drift off. Drop a comment with your location and time. I love seeing our global community grow with each story. Now, get comfortable. Seriously, adjust those pillows, pull up that blanket, because we're about to experience the Oregon Trail through the eyes of those who lived it and those who died trying. The night wind howls against the side of the wagon, a constant companion that somehow makes the bitter cold even worse. You're awake again, as usual, hours before dawn. Your back aches from sleeping on wooden planks with only a thin quilt between you and the hard surface. But it's not the discomfort keeping you up, it's the coughing. 3 wagons down, the Henderson boy has been hacking all night. Everyone's pretending not to notice, pretending not to know what it means, but you know, everyone knows cholera doesn't just go away. Thomas Mason sits up in the darkness, careful not to wake Sarah or the children. Just 3 months ago, they'd been comfortably settled in their small home in Illinois. A decent farm, neighbours they'd known for years, a community, stability. Then came the letters from Sarah's cousin in Oregon Territory. Rich soil, free land, a fresh start. Thomas had resisted at first. We have a good life here, he'd argued, but Sarah had that look in her eyes, the one he couldn't say no to, and deep down he felt it too, that pull westward, that hunger for something more. So they'd sold nearly everything, packed what remained into a wagon, and joined the Great Migration. Now, in the pre-dawn chill of a May morning somewhere in eastern Nebraska Territory, Thomas wonders if it was the biggest mistake of his life. "Pa," comes a small voice from the darkness. "Go back to sleep, Emma," Thomas whispers. "I can't," his 10-year-old daughter replies. "I keep thinking about the Henderson boy." Thomas sighs. "Me too. Is he going to die?" The question hangs in the air, so honest it hurts. "I don't know," Thomas says, though he does know. They buried Henderson's wife just last week. Try to get some sleep. Long day tomorrow. But sleep doesn't come for either of them. Instead, they listen to the wind, the distant cough, and the creak of wagon wheels as the night guard makes his rounds. Morning arrives with the crack of Captain Miller's rifle, the daily wake-up call. Thomas is already up, stoking a small fire from last night's embers. The wagon train has a strict schedule. Wake at 4 a.m, round up animals by 5, breakfast by 6, depart by 7. 14 wagons, 57 people, all following the same relentless routine. Wagons hoe. The call comes exactly at 7, and the great wheels begin to turn. Another day on the Oregon Trail begins. Sarah and Emma walk alongside the wagon like most of the women and children. Only the very young, elderly or sick ride inside, with 2 oxen and the family cow pulling nearly 1 to 800 pounds of supplies. Every bit of weight matters. 12-year-old William rides the horse, helping to keep the livestock moving. 6-year-old Daniel alternates between walking and riding, his energy never quite matching the steady pace of the wagon train. "Ma, my feet hurt," Daniel complains before they've gone a mile. "Everyone's feet hurt," Sarah replies, her voice gentle but firm. "We'll stop at noon." The morning drags on, mile after dusty mile. The prairie stretches to the horizon in every direction, an ocean of grass rippling in the breeze. Beautiful in its way, but monotonous. Thomas walks alongside the oxen, occasionally prodding them with a stick when they slow. His boots, once new at the start of the journey, are already falling apart. The right one has a hole developing at the toe, and both are permanently stained with the red-brown mud of the Missouri River crossing. That crossing, Thomas still has nightmares about it. 3 weeks ago they'd reached the wide, muddy Missouri. Some wagons paid for the ferry, $5 a wagon, steep but safer. Thomas had decided to ford the river to save money. The water was only 4 feet deep, the guide had said. Perfectly manageable. What the guide didn't mention was the current, strong enough to push a wagon sideways, or the hidden holes where the bottom suddenly dropped away. They'd been halfway across when the front right wheel hit one of those holes. The wagon lurched, nearly tipping over. Sarah had screamed. Emma fell into the water and was swept 20 yards downstream before William, on horseback, managed to grab her. They'd made it across, barely, but not everyone was so lucky. The Pattersons, 3 wagons behind them, lost everything when their wagon overturned. Their 6-month-old daughter drowned before anyone could reach her. Water ahead. The call snaps Thomas back to the present. A small creek, barely 6 feet across, appears on the horizon. Nothing like the Missouri, but still cause for caution. Captain Miller rides back along the line of wagons. It's shallow, he announces, but the banks are steep. We'll need to cut them down before crossing. The men grab shovels and axes, working to create a gentle slope on both sides of the creek. It's hot work under the midday sun, and Thomas's shirt is soaked with sweat by the time they finish. One by one, the wagons cross without incident. When it's the mason's turn, Thomas holds his breath, remembering the Missouri. But the crossing is smooth. Just a small bump as the wheels hit the opposite bank, and they're through. "See?" Sarah says, squeezing his hand. "Not all crossings are bad ones." He smiles, but his eyes drift to the Henderson wagon behind them. The boy's coughing fits have grown worse. His father, now a widower, looks hollow-eyed and lost. Noon brings a brief respite, a 1-hour halt to rest the animals, eat a cold meal, and refill water barrels. Sarah hands out hardtack and jerky, the monotonous trail diet that's already becoming tiresome. They've been on the trail for over a month, and fresh supplies are dwindling. The flour is running low, the dried apples are gone, and the salt pork won't last forever. "I miss real bread," Emma sighs, gnawing on a piece of hardtack so hard it could break teeth. "Soak it in coffee," William suggests. "Makes it easier to chew." "Wastes good coffee," Thomas mutters, but he's thinking the same thing. What he wouldn't give for a loaf of Sarah's fresh bread, still warm from the oven. Back on the trail after the noon break, the afternoon heat becomes oppressive. The wagons kick up dust that hangs in the air, coating everything in a fine powder that works its way into clothes, food, and lungs. Daniel starts coughing, and Sarah gives Thomas a frightened look. "It's just the dust," he assures her, though he can't be certain. The afternoon drags into evening. The sun begins to set, painting the prairie in shades of gold and pink. Finally, at 5 p.m, Captain Miller signals to make camp near a bend in the creek they crossed earlier. The wagons form a circle, not for protection against Indians, as many Easterners believe, but to create a corral for the livestock. Each family has their designated spot in the circle, a tiny piece of order in the vast wilderness. Camp setup is a well-practiced routine. Thomas unhitches the oxen while William takes them and the cow to graze. Sarah and Emma set up the cooking fire, and Daniel collects buffalo chips, dried dung that burns well in the absence of wood. It's so gross, Daniel giggles, carrying an armful of the chips. Just don't lick your fingers afterward, Sarah warns, and they all laugh, a brief moment of normality in their upended lives. Dinner is a stew of salt pork and dried beans, cooked in the Dutch oven over the open fire. It's the same meal they had yesterday and the day before, but no one complains. At least it's hot. As they eat, Captain Miller makes his rounds, stopping at each fire to share news and check on the families. There's a trading post 2 days ahead, he tells Thomas. Fort Kearney. We can resupply there. Any word on the Henderson boy? Sarah asks quietly. Miller's face darkens. Not good. Doc thinks he won't last the night. Thomas nods, thanking Miller for the information. Once the captain moves on, he turns to Sarah. Keep the children away from that wagon, he says, just to be safe. She nods, understanding the unspoken fear. Cholera spreads quickly in the close quarters of a wagon train. After dinner, there's a brief period of relaxation before nightfall. Some folks gather to sing or tell stories. A fiddle plays somewhere in the circle, its cheerful tune at odds with the sombre mood. The masons stay at their own fire, too tired for socializing. Emma helps Sarah wash the dishes with precious water, while Daniel and William collect the livestock from grazing. Thomas checks the wagon, tightening loose bolts and greasing the axles. Maintenance is constant. A broken wheel or axle in the wilderness could mean death. As darkness falls, the guards for the first watch take their positions. Thomas isn't on guard duty tonight, thankful for the chance to rest. The family settles into the wagon for the night, arranging themselves in the cramped space. Sarah and the younger children sleep in the wagon bed, while Thomas and William make do with bedrolls underneath. Just as they're settling in, a wail cuts through the night. Raw, primal grief that makes everyone freeze. It comes from the Henderson wagon. The boy is gone. No one sleeps much after that. Dawn brings a solemn task, burying young Michael Henderson. The wagon train is delayed by 2 hours for the funeral. Precious time lost in the race to cross the mountains before winter. The grave is shallow, dug in the hard prairie soil. There's no wood for a coffin, so the boy is wrapped in a blanket. Reverend Johnson, who doubles as a farmer from Ohio, says a few words from the Bible. The grieving father stands silent, empty. Thomas holds Sarah's hand tightly as they watch. Emma cries quietly. Daniel hides his face in his mother's skirts. William stands straight, trying to be a man, but his lips tremble. That could have been one of ours, Thomas thinks, the fear that's never far from his mind surfacing again. When it's over, Captain Miller gives the order. Wagons, hoe, life and death on the trail exist side by side, with barely a pause between them. The wagon train moves on, leaving behind a small mound of fresh earth and a crude wooden marker that will likely be gone by winter. Just one more grave along the Oregon Trail. The day after the burial is unnaturally quiet. Even the children seem subdued, as if the reality of their journey has finally sunk in. This isn't an adventure from the dime novels William loves to read. This is life and death, played out across 2,000 miles of wilderness. Thomas walks beside the wagon, lost in thought. The trading post is still a day away, and supplies are running low. The flour sack feels distressingly light when Sarah dips into it for breakfast. The coffee is down to the last few handfuls of beans. Even the oxen seem tired, moving sluggishly despite the prodding. Thomas. Sarah's urgent call snaps him out of his thoughts. She's pointing ahead where the lead wagons have stopped. The entire train has halted and people are gathering at the front. Stay with the wagon, Thomas tells her, jogging ahead to see what's happening. The crowd parts as he approaches, and he sees Captain Miller on his knees beside a man Thomas doesn't recognise. The stranger is filthy, his clothes torn, his face gaunt with exhaustion. He's clutching a canteen someone has given him, drinking desperately. "Who is he?" Thomas asks Johnson, who's standing nearby. "Ryder from the Donner Party," Johnson says grimly. "They're a week ahead of us, heading for California. Says they're in trouble." Captain Miller helps the man to his feet. "Tell everyone what you told me," he says. The stranger coughs, then speaks. His voice is raspy, as if he hasn't used it in days. "Donner Party took the Hastings cutoff. It's supposed to save 350 miles to California." He shakes his head. "It's a death trap. No water for 40 miles across the salt desert. Wagons breaking down in the mountains. They sent me back to warn anyone following." A murmur runs through the crowd. The Hastings Cutoff is a new route that branches off from the main trail near Fort Bridger, promising a shorter path to California. Several families in their train had been considering it. "We're bound for Oregon, not California," Captain Miller says, "but we thank you for the warning. The cutoff splits from your trail too," the man insists. "Some of you might be tempted. Don't be. Stick to the main route." The news casts a shadow over the already sombre mood of the train. That night around the campfire, it's all anyone can talk about. "Those poor folks," Sarah says quietly, stirring the bean pot. "Trapped in the mountains with winter coming." Thomas nods, poking at the fire with a stick. "Makes our troubles seem small." "Will they die, Pa?" Daniel asks, his eyes wide. Thomas hesitates. "I don't know, son. But they're tough folks, like us. They'll fight hard to survive." The conversation is interrupted by a distant rumble of thunder. Thomas looks up to see dark clouds gathering on the western horizon. A storm is coming. "Better secure everything," he tells William. "Looks like we're in for some weather." They work quickly, tying down loose items and making sure the wagon cover is securely fastened. Other families do the same, a flurry of activity around the circle as everyone prepares for the storm. The first fat drops of rain begin to fall just as they finish. Within minutes, it's a downpour. Lightning cracks across the sky, followed immediately by booming thunder that makes the oxen low nervously. The family huddles inside the wagon, listening to the rain pound on the canvas cover. Water begins to seep in at the corners despite their best efforts. Sarah places buckets to catch the worst leaks, but soon the wagon floor is damp everywhere. "At least we're not crossing a river in this," Thomas says, trying to find something positive. No one sleeps well that night. The storm rages for hours, wind threatening to tear the canvas covers from the wagons. Sometime past midnight, Thomas hears a crash followed by shouts. Someone's wagon cover has ripped free. By morning, the storm has passed, but it leaves behind a muddy mess. The creek they've been following has swollen to twice its normal size, and the ground is too soft for the wagons to move. Captain Miller makes the call. They'll stay put for a day to let things dry out. It's another delay they can't afford, but there's no choice. Pushing on would mean broken wheels and axles. The day of forced rest is both blessing and curse. It gives everyone a chance to recover from the funeral and the storm, to repair minor damage and reorganize supplies, but it's also a day closer to winter without being a day closer to Oregon. Thomas uses the time to hunt, bringing back 2 prairie chickens that Sarah roasts over the fire. It's the first fresh meat they've had in weeks, and even with minimal seasoning, it tastes like heaven after so much salt pork and beans. The rest of the day passes in chores, washing clothes in the creek, repacking the wagon, mending tears in the canvas. By evening, the ground has begun to firm up, and Captain Miller announces they'll move out at first light. That night, as the family settles in for sleep, Emma asks the question that's been on everyone's mind since the burial. "Pa, are we going to make it to Oregon?" The wagon falls silent. Even Daniel, usually quick to sleep, is awake and listening. Thomas takes a long time to answer. "Yes," he says finally. "It won't be easy. There will be hard days ahead. Mountains to cross, rivers to ford, weather to endure. But we're strong, and we're together. We'll make it." Sarah reaches for his hand in the darkness, squeezing it tight. He hopes his words reassure the children. He hopes they're true. As the family drifts off to sleep, Thomas remains awake, listening to the night sounds of the prairie. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howls, a lonely sound that echoes across the vast emptiness. Tomorrow they'll move on, another day closer to their destination, another day of uncertainty. The morning dawns clear and cool, the mud already firming under the rising sun. The wagon train stirs to life with the usual routine, but there's a new energy in the air. The trading post is just ahead, a small taste of civilization in the wilderness. As they break camp, Thomas notices the Henderson wagon is gone. During the night, the widower had quietly packed his remaining belongings onto his horse and turned back east. No one blames him. Without his wife and son, there's nothing pulling him westward anymore. "Wagons ho," comes the call, and the great wheels begin to turn once more. The Oregon Trail stretches before them, endless and unforgiving, but today at least there's something to look forward to. Fresh supplies, news from the settlements, maybe even letters from home. The wagon train moves forward, leaving behind another patch of disturbed earth, another small monument to the cost of the journey. Ahead lies Fort Kearny, the Great Plains, the Rocky Mountains, and eventually, if they're lucky, Oregon Territory. Thomas takes the reins, his bloodstained boots planted firmly on the wagon board. The journey continues. Fort Kearny rises from the prairie like something from another world. After weeks of nothing but grass and sky, the sight of actual buildings, even crude ones made of sod and cottonwood, seems almost miraculous. Thomas feels his spirits lift as the wagon train approaches. The American flag snaps in the breeze above the fort, a reminder that they haven't left civilization entirely behind. Not yet, anyway. "Look, children," Sarah says, pointing. "We'll sleep in real beds tonight." Emma's eyes widen. "Really, Ma?" Sarah laughs, the first genuine laugh Thomas has heard from her in days. "No, sweet girl, the fort doesn't have enough beds for all of us, but there will be fresh food and supplies." Captain Miller rides back along the line of wagons. "We'll camp outside the fort tonight. Tomorrow morning you can take turns going into trade. 2 hours per family, no more. We leave at noon, with or without you." The strict schedule is necessary. Every day counts in the race to cross the mountains before snow makes the passes impassable. As the wagons form their circle for the night, there's a buzz of excitement in the air. People who've barely spoken since the Henderson boys' death are suddenly chattering, sharing lists of supplies they hope to buy, wondering about news from the States. "What are we trading for, Pa?" William asks as they unhitch the oxen. Thomas wipes sweat from his forehead. "Coffee, first of all. We're almost out. Flour, sugar if they have it, maybe some dried fruit for your mother." William nods, serious as always. At 12, he's taken on the responsibility of a man on this journey, working alongside Thomas from dawn till dusk. Sometimes Thomas forgets he's still a boy. "And a peppermint stick for Daniel," Thomas adds with a wink. "Don't tell him." That night, a delegation from the fort visits the wagon train. 2 soldiers and a guide named Harper, who knows the trail ahead. Captain Miller invites the wagon leaders to hear what they have to say. "River's high at the crossing," Harper tells them, squatting by the fire and accepting a cup of coffee. He's a weathered man with a beard down to his chest and skin tanned like old leather. "Snow melt from the mountains. You'll want to use the ferry 20 miles upstream." "How much?" someone asks. $5 a wagon. A murmur ripples through the group. $5 is steep. Worth every penny, Harper says, reading their thoughts. Already pulled 3 bodies from the river this month, folks who thought they could save a few dollars. Thomas thinks of the Missouri crossing, how close they came to disaster. "We'll take the ferry," he says firmly. After the meeting breaks up, Thomas returns to the family wagon to find Sarah doing inventory of their supplies. "How bad?" he asks. She sighs. "Flour's almost gone. Coffee too. Salt pork will last another week if we're careful. The dried beans are holding out, but..." "The children need more than beans," Thomas finishes. They both look over to where Emma and Daniel are playing a clapping game by the fire. They've grown noticeably thinner since leaving Illinois. "We have the trading goods," Sarah reminds him. Back in Independence, they'd packed items specifically for trading. Extra tools, fabric, needles, and thread. Things that would be precious on the frontier. And the silver dollars, Thomas adds. They'd sold their farm for $60 in silver, a sum that had seemed substantial at the beginning of the journey. Now, with so far still to go, every coin feels precious. Dawn brings a flurry of activity as families prepare for their turn at the fort. The Masons are scheduled for mid-morning, giving Thomas time to clean up and change into his one good shirt. Appearances matter in trading. "You look handsome," Sarah says, smoothing his collar. She's put on her best dress as well, though best is relative after weeks on the trail. Her once blue calico is now a faded grey, the hem caked with prairie dust that will never fully wash out. When their turn comes, Thomas leaves William in charge of the camp and walks with Sarah and the younger children to the fort. The trading post is a single room in the main building, shelves stocked with the necessities of trail life. The prices are extortionate. Flour that would cost 50 cents back home is $2 here. Coffee is 3 times the normal price, but they have no choice without supplies. They won't make it to Oregon. Thomas haggles as best he can, trading 2 spare horseshoes and a length of calico for 10 pounds of flour and a small sack of coffee beans. He parts with 1 precious silver dollar for sugar, dried apples, and true to his word, a peppermint stick for Daniel. "Can I have it now, Pa?" Daniel asks, eyeing the candy. "After dinner," Sarah says before Thomas can answer. "If you eat your beans." While Thomas handles the trading, Sarah visits the fort's small medical station. She returns with a packet of willow bark for pain and fever and grim news. "Choleras all along the trail this year," she tells Thomas as they walk back to the wagon. "The doctor says there's been 50 deaths at the Platte crossing alone." Thomas feels a cold knot form in his stomach. "Did you tell him about the Henderson boy?" Sarah nods. "He says to boil all our water, even if it looks clean, and to bury our waste away from any water source." It's common sense, but Thomas has seen how careless some folks can be on the trail. Exhaustion makes people sloppy. Back at camp, there's more news circulating. A large party of Pawnee has been spotted nearby. Not hostile, according to the fort commander, but hungry after a poor buffalo hunt. "They'll want to trade," Captain Miller tells the group, "or beg. Either way, be respectful but firm. We can't spare much." Some of the emigrants look nervous. Stories of Indian attacks have followed them west, though most are exaggerated or completely false. The real dangers of the trail disease, accidents, starvation are far more deadly than any native tribe. Sure enough, as the wagon train prepares to depart the next day, a group of about 20 Pawnee appears on the horizon. They approach slowly, making it clear they're not looking for trouble. Captain Miller, the fort commander, and Harper the guide ride out to meet them. There's a long exchange, with Harper translating, then Miller returns to the wagons. "They want to trade," he announces. "They're offering moccasins and buffalo meat for coffee, sugar and tobacco." Fresh meat is a powerful temptation after weeks of salt pork. Several families, including the Masons, decide to trade. The Pawnee set up a makeshift trading area between their horses and the wagons. Thomas approaches with Sarah carrying a small pouch of coffee beans and some sugar wrapped in cloth. A middle-aged Pawnee man with elaborate beadwork on his buckskin shirt examines their offerings. He nods and hands over a substantial piece of dried buffalo meat. The exchange is silent but respectful. "Thank him," Sarah whispers to Thomas. "Thank you," Thomas says, nodding to the man. To his surprise, the Pawnee trader responds in broken English. "Good meat. Make strong." He points to Daniel and Emma, watching wide-eyed from a distance. "For children, grow big." Thomas is momentarily taken aback, then smiles and nods. Yes, for the children. As they walk away with their precious meat, Emma tugs at her mother's skirt. "They're not scary at all," she says, sounding disappointed. Sarah laughs. "What did you expect? Screaming savages like in William's dime novels?" "Maybe," Emma admits. "People are just people, no matter what they wear or how they live," Sarah tells her. "Remember that." It's a lesson Thomas hopes will stick. In the vast territory they're crossing, they'll encounter many different tribes. Approaching each with respect rather than fear could make all the difference. By noon, the trading is done and the wagons roll out. Fort Kearny shrinks behind them, the last proper outpost they'll see for hundreds of miles. Ahead lies the wide Platte River, which they'll follow westward toward the mountains. The land is changing subtly. The lush prairie grass of eastern Nebraska gives way to shorter, tougher varieties. The terrain becomes more rolling, with occasional bluffs breaking the horizon. It's beautiful in its vastness, but Thomas is constantly aware of how exposed they are out here. A storm, a fire, a hostile encounter. There's nowhere to hide on the open plains. They make good progress that afternoon, covering nearly 15 miles before making camp along a small tributary of the Platte. The fresh buffalo meat is a welcome change from their usual fare. Sarah cuts it into strips and boils it with dried beans and a precious pinch of salt. It's the best meal they've had in weeks. The good mood continues into the evening. Someone brings out a fiddle and there's dancing around the central fire. Even Captain Miller seems to relax a bit, sharing a pipe with Harper, who's decided to accompany them to the river crossing. Thomas watches Sarah twirl Emma in a simple dance, her tired face momentarily free of worry. These are the moments that make the hardships worthwhile, he thinks. These small pockets of joy amid the struggle. William sits beside him, whittling a piece of wood with his pocket knife. "Pa," he says without looking up, "do you think we'll really make it to Oregon?" The question catches Thomas off guard. William rarely expresses doubt or fear. "Yes," he says firmly. "We've come this far, haven't we? And we're still strong." William nods, but doesn't look convinced. Harper says the mountains are the real test, and winter comes early up high. "We'll be through the mountains before the snow flies," Thomas assures him, hoping it's true. Captain Miller knows what he's doing. The fiddle strikes up a livelier tune, and Daniel runs over, grabbing William's hand. "Come dance, Will." William protests, but Daniel is insistent, and finally the older boy allows himself to be pulled into the circle of dancers. Thomas watches his son sewn on the cusp of manhood, the other still so childlike, and feels a fierce surge of love and protectiveness. He'll get them to Oregon. He has to. The next few days settle into a rhythm. Up before dawn on the trail by 15 miles a day following the broad, muddy Platte. The river is both lifeline and obstacle, providing water for people and animals, but also breeding mosquitoes that swarm in black clouds at dawn and dusk. "I'm being eaten alive," Sarah complains on the third night, slapping at her neck. "Here," Thomas says, handing her a small tin of bear grease mixed with pennyroyal that he traded for at the fort. Rub this on, smells terrible, but the mosquitoes hate it. Sarah wrinkles her nose at the pungent odour, but applies the greasy mixture to her exposed skin and the children's. The relief is immediate, though now they all smell like rancid meat. "I think I preferred the mosquitoes," Emma says, gagging at the smell on her arms. But the mosquitoes are more than an annoyance. Harper tells them that marsh fever, probably malaria. Thomas thinks kills nearly as many emigrants as cholera. The greasy repellent is a small price to pay for protection. On the 5th day after Fort Kearney, they reach the ferry crossing. It's a crude affair, just a large raft attached to a rope system that spans the river, but it looks sturdy enough, and Thomas is glad they opted for this rather than trying to ford the swollen river. The ferry can only take one wagon at a time, so the crossing is slow. Each family waits their turn, watching anxiously as their worldly possessions are floated across the muddy expanse. When the mason's turn comes, Thomas drives the wagon onto the raft while Sarah and the children wait on shore. They'll cross on the return trip. The ferryman, a grizzled old mountain man with a missing front tooth, gives instructions in a gravelly voice. "Keep them oxen calm," he warns. "They spook. We all go swimming." Thomas nods, holding the lead ox's halter firmly. The animal is nervous, rolling its eyes at the unfamiliar movement beneath its hooves. The crossing seems to take forever. The raft moves agonizingly slowly, pulled by men on both shores working a complex system of ropes. The river is perhaps 100 yards wide here, but the current is swift, pushing constantly against the side of the raft. Halfway across, one of the oxen bellows and tries to back up, causing the wagon to shift dangerously. The raft tilts, water sloshing over the edge. "Steady him," the ferryman shouts, leaning his weight against the listing side. Thomas grabs the ox's harness with both hands, speaking in low, soothing tones. "Easy now. Easy, boy." Gradually, the animal calms, and the raft rights itself. Thomas releases a breath he didn't realise he was holding. A dunking in the Platte would mean the loss of everything they own. The rest of the crossing passes without incident, and soon the wagon is safely on the western shore. Thomas breathes a sigh of relief as he drives it up the bank and parks it on level ground. Now he just has to wait for the raft to return with his family. The wait is excruciating. From this side, he can see how fast the river is moving, how precarious the crossing really is. When Sarah and the children finally step onto the raft, he can barely watch. Emma waves excitedly from the raft, treating the dangerous crossing like an adventure. Daniel clings to Sarah's skirts, clearly frightened. William stands straight and still, trying to appear unaffected. Thomas doesn't breathe easily until all 3 children and Sarah are safely on shore beside him. "That wasn't so bad," Sarah says, but her pale face and trembling hands tell a different story. By nightfall, the entire wagon train has crossed safely, a minor miracle, according to Harper. "Lost a family of 5 at this crossing last month," he tells them around the fire. "Raft broke loose, flipped over. None of them could swim." It's a sobering reminder of how quickly disaster can strike on the trail. That night, Thomas lies awake long after the others are asleep, listening to the distant rush of the river and giving silent thanks for their safe passage. The trail changes after the Platte crossing. The land begins to rise almost imperceptibly. The first hint of the mountains still hundreds of miles ahead. The grass becomes sparser, the soil sandier. They're entering the true west now, leaving behind the last vestiges of the familiar eastern landscapes. Game becomes more plentiful as they move into territory less hunted by settlers. Thomas manages to shoot a pronghorn antelope one evening, providing a feast for the entire wagon train. It's his first significant contribution to the group's food supply, and he feels a pride that surprises him. "Fine shot," Captain Miller compliments him as they butcher the animal together. "Mostly luck," Thomas admits. "It just stood there looking at me." Miller chuckles. "Luck counts on the trail. Take it when it comes. It's good advice. Out here, so far from civilization, luck can mean the difference between life and death." A week after the river crossing, they encounter their first buffalo herd, thousands of massive beasts stretching across the horizon like a dark, moving carpet. The sight is awe-inspiring, even to Harper, who claims to have seen it all. "Never gets old," he says, shaking his head in wonder. The wagon train stops to watch the spectacle. Several men, including Thomas, grab their rifles, eager for fresh meat, but Miller holds them back. "Too dangerous," he says firmly. "You spook that herd, they'll run right over us. We'll hunt when we make camp if they're still nearby." No one argues. The sheer power of the massive animals is evident even from a distance. A stampede would crush wagons and people alike. That evening, a small hunting party, including Thomas and William, rides out. They manage to bring down a young buffalo cow enough meat to feed the entire train for days. The butchering is a community affair, with men cutting the meat and women preparing it for smoking and drying. Most of it will be preserved as jerky for the journey ahead. Nothing is wasted. The hide will become moccasins or patches for worn boots, the bones tools or arrow points, the fat rendered for cooking and waterproofing. William watches the process with fascination. "It's like a whole store inside one animal," he marvels. "That's how the Indians survive out here," Thomas explains. "One buffalo can feed a family for months if they use every part." As they work, clouds begin to gather on the western horizon. By the time the meat is hung to smoke, the sky has darkened ominously. "Storm coming," Harper announces unnecessarily. "Big one, by the look of it." Captain Miller makes the decision to circle the wagons tightly and secure everything that might blow away. There's no shelter on the open prairie. All they can do is hunker down and endure. The storm hits just after nightfall, a howling monster of wind and rain that threatens to tear the canvas covers from the wagons. Lightning turns night to day in blinding flashes, followed instantly by thunder that shakes the ground. The oxen and horses panic, requiring constant attention to prevent them from breaking free. Inside the Mason wagon, Sarah and the children huddle together, jumping at each crash of thunder. Thomas and William take turns checking the animals and the wagon cover, returning soaked to the skin each time. "Will we be blown away?" Daniel asks, his voice small with fear. "No, sweetheart," Sarah assures him, though her own voice wavers. "The wagon's too heavy to blow away." But as the night wears on and the storm intensifies, Thomas isn't so sure. He's seen what prairie storms can do: tear roofs from buildings, uproot trees, even lift wagons off the ground. This is one of the worst he's experienced. Around midnight, disaster strikes. A lightning bolt hits the Johnson's wagon directly, setting the canvas cover ablaze despite the pouring rain. The fire spreads quickly to the wooden frame. Thomas and William join the mad rush to help, forming a bucket brigade from the water barrels. But it's too late. The wagon is engulfed, its contents beyond saving. Fortunately, the family escapes unharmed, though they lose everything except the clothes on their backs. By dawn, the storm has passed, leaving behind a sea of mud and a group of exhausted travellers. The Johnsons stand shell-shocked beside the charred remains of their wagon. their journey seemingly at an end. Thomas wakes to the sound of coughing. For a moment, disoriented by sleep, he thinks it's the Henderson boy again. Then reality crashes back. It's Sarah, and the cough sounds worse than last night. He scrambles up from his bedroll beneath the wagon, wincing as his stiff muscles protest. The eastern sky is just beginning to lighten, the first hint of dawn still an hour away. The camp is quiet except for Sarah's coughing and the soft snoring of the night guard, who should be awake but has dozed off at his post. Inside the wagon, Sarah is burning with fever, her nightdress soaked with sweat. Emma is already awake, bathing her mother's forehead with a damp cloth. "She got worse about an hour ago," Emma whispers, her young face drawn with worry. "I didn't want to wake you yet." Thomas puts a hand on his daughter's shoulder, surprised and moved by her composure. "You did right," he tells her. "Let me take over now." Emma nods and slips out of the wagon to start the morning fire. Thomas can hear her quietly waking William to help her. At 10 years old, Emma has grown up so much in the months since they left Illinois. "Sarah," Thomas says softly, pressing a hand to her cheek. Her skin is alarmingly hot. "Can you drink something?" Sarah's eyes flutter open, glazed with fever. "Water," she manages to whisper. Thomas helps her sit up enough to sip from the canteen. She takes a few swallows, then falls back, exhausted by even that small effort. "The yellow root tea," she murmurs. "It helped." Thomas nods and climbs down from the wagon. Emma already has water boiling over the small fire. Smart girl. "We need to make more of that tea for your mother," he tells her. Emma nods solemnly. "Will she get better, Pa?" Thomas forces a confidence he doesn't feel. "Of course she will. Your Ma's the strongest woman I know." As he prepares the tea, Captain Miller approaches, his face grim in the firelight. "How is she?" he asks without preamble. "Fever's worse," Thomas admits, "but no sign of cholera yet." Miller nods, relief evident in his posture. Cholera would mean quarantine at the very least, possibly being left behind if the illness spread. "We need to make Fort Laramie," Miller says. "They have a proper doctor there. It's about 6 days' travel if we push hard." Thomas feels a surge of hope. A real doctor could make all the difference. "She can travel?" Miller asks. "She'll have to," Thomas replies. "There's no other choice. Staying behind alone would be a death sentence." The captain nods once, then moves on to rouse the rest of the camp. Within the hour, the wagon train is rolling, despite the early start. Everyone understands the urgency of reaching Fort Laramie. The terrain grows steadily more challenging as they push westward. The flat prairie gives way to rolling hills and dramatic rock formations. Chimney Rock appears on the horizon like a beacon, its distinctive shape a landmark all trail travellers recognise. "It means we're almost halfway," Harper tells them around the fire that night. "Chimney Rock to Fort Laramie, then Fort Laramie to South Pass through the mountains." "And then?" William asks. "Then the real hard part begins," Harper says with a wry smile. "Down the Snake River country, through the Blue Mountains, and finally to the Columbia and the Willamette Valley." Thomas listens, but says little, his thoughts with Sarah. Her fever has remained high all day, despite regular doses of the yellow root tea. She's growing weaker, taking only sips of water and broth. That night, as the children sleep, Thomas sits beside the wagon, keeping watch over Sarah. The vast sky above is ablaze with stars, more than he ever saw back east. The beauty of it makes his chest ache. "Thomas?" Sarah's voice, thin but clear, startles him. He climbs into the wagon and finds her awake, her eyes bright but more lucid than they've been all day. "I'm here," he says, taking her hand. "If I don't make it—" "Don't talk like that," he interrupts, squeezing her fingers. "Listen to me," she insists, with a flash of her old stubbornness. "If I don't make it, you must go on. Get the children to Oregon, promise me." Thomas feels his throat tighten. "I already promised, remember? But you're going to be fine. We'll reach Fort Laramie soon, and there's a doctor there." Sarah manages a weak smile, always the optimist. One of us has to be. They sit in silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the prairie, the distant howl of a coyote, the rustle of wind through grass, the occasional stamp of an ox. "I don't regret coming," Sarah says finally, "even if I wanted this journey for all of us. I know." And he does know. For all the hardships, there have been moments of such beauty, such wonder, that he understands why they risked everything. Sarah's eyes begin to droop, the brief energy fading. "Sing to me," she murmurs, "like you used to." So Thomas sings, softly, so as not to wake the children, an old song his mother taught him about green valleys and flowing rivers and a home waiting at the end of the road. Sarah falls asleep to the sound of his voice, her breathing a little easier than before. The next morning brings a glimmer of hope. Sarah's fever has broken during the night. She's weak as a newborn kitten, but her eyes are clear and she manages to eat a small bowl of corn mush. "Don't get too excited," Harper warns when Thomas shares the good news. "Marsh fever comes and goes. She'll likely get worse again before she gets better." But Thomas can't help feeling hopeful. Sarah is a fighter. She always has been. The wagon train pushes on, covering 15 miles that day despite the increasingly rough terrain. They're entering proper hill country now, leaving the endless flat prairie behind. The hills are a welcome change from the monotony, but they slow the wagons considerably. Oxen strain against the yokes on the upslopes and wheel brakes squeal on the descents. "Hard on man and beast," Miller comments during the noon rest, "but it means we're making progress." That evening, they camp within sight of Scott's Bluff, a massive rock formation that towers over the surrounding landscape like a fortress. Emma and Daniel stare at it in awe. "Are those the mountains?" Daniel asks. William, always eager to show off his knowledge, shakes his head. "No, dummy. The real mountains are much bigger. Those are just bluffs." "Don't call your brother dummy," Thomas reprimands automatically, though his mind is mostly on Sarah. Harper's warning proved accurate. Her fever has returned, though not as high as before. That night brings a new problem. As Thomas checks on the oxen before turning in, he notices one limping badly. "Hoof's split," Harper confirms after examining the animal. "Been coming on for a while, I'd guess." "Can it be fixed?" Thomas asks, already knowing the answer. Harper shakes his head. "Not out here. Beast'll go lame for sure, might even die if infection sets in. So what do we do?" "Butcher it," Harper says bluntly, "before it gets too sick to eat. One ox can pull your wagon if you lighten the load enough." The thought of killing one of their precious oxen, of lightening their already minimal belongings, makes Thomas's stomach twist. But again, there's no real choice. "I'll tell Miller," he says heavily. The next morning, before dawn, they slaughter the ox. It's a grim business, but nothing is wasted. The meat is cut into strips for drying, the hide carefully preserved, the bones and hooves saved for tools and glue. Even the blood is collected for blood pudding. "Never thought I'd be grateful for an ox going lame," Sarah says weakly from the wagon, watching the butchering. "But we needed the fresh meat. It's true, they've been subsisting on beans, corn mush, and the occasional small game Thomas manages to shoot. The rich organ meat, liver, heart, kidneys will give them strength for the days ahead, but losing an ox means redistributing the load. They spend hours going through their possessions, deciding what to keep and what to abandon. Sarah's rocking chair, carried all the way from Illinois, is the first to go. "We can make another when we reach Oregon," she says, though Thomas sees the pain in her eyes as the chair is given to the Johnson family, who lost everything in the lightning strike. Next goes Thomas's toolbox, reduced to just a hammer, saw, and a few essential tools. Books, extra clothing, Emma's rag doll, William's collection of interesting rocks, all are set aside, either given away or simply left behind. By the time they're done, the wagon is noticeably lighter, but Thomas feels hollowed out. These simple possessions were all they had left of their old life. "It's just stuff," Sarah reminds him, seeing his expression. "We have what matters." She's right, of course. Their children are healthy, Sarah is improving, and they still have enough supplies to reach Oregon if they're careful. Many families on the trail have lost far more. With the lighter wagon, they make good time the next day, despite having only one ox. The second ox, paired with their milk cow, proves a surprisingly effective team. By nightfall, they can see Fort Laramie in the distance, a welcome sight after the long, hard journey across the plains. They reach the fort the following afternoon. Unlike Fort Kearny, Laramie is a substantial installation, with proper buildings, a trading post, and most importantly, a doctor. Thomas doesn't wait for Miller's permission. The moment they stop, he's carrying Sarah to the doctor's quarters. Dr. Matthews is a young army surgeon with tired eyes and capable hands. He examines Sarah thoroughly, listening to her breathing and checking her pulse. Intermittent fever, he confirms finally. Not cholera, thank God, probably from mosquito bites along the Platte. The relief that floods through Thomas makes his knees weak. Not cholera, not the death sentence they've been dreading. "Can you help her?" he asks. The doctor nods. "I have quinine. It's the only reliable treatment for marsh fever. Expensive, though." "How much?" Thomas asks, mentally counting the remaining silver dollars in their dwindling funds. "Or $5 for enough to treat her completely. It's a fortune, nearly a tenth of all they have left, but there's no question of refusing." "We'll pay," Thomas says firmly. The doctor prepares the medicine, a bitter white powder dissolved in water. "She'll need to take this twice daily for at least a week," he instructs. "It may make her sick to her stomach at first, but she must keep taking it." Thomas nods, memorizing the instructions. This precious medicine could save Sarah's life. Back at the wagon, he finds Captain Miller talking with a group of men he doesn't recognize. They look trail-worn, but not destitute, experienced travelers rather than desperate greenhorns. "Thomas," Miller calls him over. "These men came through South Pass 2 weeks ago. They say the snow is already starting in the higher elevations." A cold knot forms in Thomas's stomach. Snow in the mountains already? It's only early September. "Early winter this year," one of the men says grimly. "You folks need to push hard if you want to get through before the passes close." Miller looks grim. "We'll rest here 2 days, no more. Everyone who's continuing needs to be ready to move out at dawn on the 3rd day. "Continuing?" Thomas asks, catching the implication. Miller sighs. "Some families are stopping here for the winter. The Johnsons, the Wilsons, a few others. They'll try again in the spring." It's not an unreasonable decision. Fort Laramie offers safety, shelter, and the chance to earn money working for the army or trading with passing caravans. Wintering here would be far safer than risking mountain passes in early snow. "What do you think we should do?" Thomas asks Sarah that evening after giving her the first dose of quinine. She's resting on a proper cot in the fort's infirmary, looking smaller and more fragile than he's ever seen her, but her eyes are clear and determined. "We go on," she says without hesitation. "We've come too far to stop now." Thomas isn't surprised. Sarah has been the driving force behind this journey from the beginning. "You're still weak," he reminds her. "The mountains are the hardest part of the trail." "I'll get stronger," she insists. "The doctor says the quinine works quickly and we can't afford to winter here. We'd use up all our money before spring." She's right about that. Even 2 days at the fort will make a significant dent in their funds. Supplies here are even more expensive than at Fort Kearney, and they need to restock before tackling the mountains. "All right," Thomas agrees. "We go on, but you rest in the wagon until you're stronger." Sarah smiles, reaching for his hand. "Have I ever told you how much I love you, Thomas Mason?" "Not nearly often enough," he teases, feeling a weight lift from his chest. She's still weak, still sick, but she sounds like herself again. It's the best medicine he could ask for. The 2 days at Fort Laramie pass quickly. Thomas trades their remaining goods for supplies: flour, coffee, sugar, salt, and ammunition. He splurges on a small bag of dried apples for Sarah and the children, a rare treat. William helps the fort blacksmith and earns $2 precious, which go toward a new axe head to replace the one that broke crossing the Platte. Emma and Daniel explore the fort, wide-eyed at the soldiers in uniform, the Native Americans who come to trade, and the bustling activity of the trading post. It's the closest thing to civilization they've seen since independence, and they soak it in like thirsty plants. Sarah grows stronger with each dose of quinine, though the medicine does indeed make her violently ill at first. By the second day, she's able to sit up and even walk short distances with Thomas's help. "The doctor says I should be almost fully recovered in another week," she tells him, her voice stronger than it's been in days. "Just in time for the mountains," Thomas says, trying to sound cheerful despite his worry. On the morning they're set to leave, Miller takes a final count. Of the 14 wagons that left Fort Kearney, only 9 will continue beyond Fort Laramie. The others have either turned back or decided to winter at the fort. "Smaller group means we can move faster," Miller says, though Thomas hears the concern behind his words. "Fewer wagons means fewer men for hunting, guarding, and helping with river crossings and steep grades." Harper, to everyone's surprise, decides to continue with them, rather than wait for the next eastbound group as he'd originally planned. "Got a feeling about this bunch," he tells Thomas with a shrug. "Besides, you'll need someone who knows the mountain trails if the snow comes early." Thomas is more grateful than he can express. Harper's knowledge of the trail has already saved them more than once. As they pull out from Fort Laramie, Thomas can't help looking back at the solid walls and buildings. For a brief moment, he's tempted to change his mind, to join those staying behind for the winter. But then he glances at Sarah, sitting up in the wagon and looking westward with determination in her eyes, and he knows they've made the right choice. The landscape changes dramatically as they move beyond Fort Laramie. The rolling hills give way to more rugged terrain, with rocky outcroppings and stunted pine trees replacing the endless grass of the plains. The air grows cooler and drier, especially at night, when the temperature now regularly drops below freezing. "We're climbing," Harper explains. "Not the real mountains yet, but we're gaining elevation every day. You can feel it in your breathing if you pay attention." Thomas does notice that he tires more easily, that sometimes he finds himself short of breath after activities that wouldn't have winded him back on the plains. The children seem unaffected, but Sarah struggles, her body still recovering from the fever. Game becomes more plentiful as they enter new hunting grounds. Thomas brings down a mule deer one evening, providing fresh meat for several days. William shoots a sage grouse with the small rifle Thomas has finally allowed him to carry, beaming with pride at his contribution. "Nice shot," Thomas tells him, genuinely impressed. "Your mother will make a fine stew with that." Even Sarah is able to help again, though she tires quickly. She sits by the fire directing Emma in cooking and mending, gradually taking on more tasks as her strength returns. The wagon train falls into a new rhythm, up at dawn, on the trail by first light to make the most of the shortening days. They stop earlier in the evening now, needing time to collect enough firewood for the cold nights. The work is harder, the days longer, but they're making steady progress towards South Pass, the gateway through the mountains. One evening, about a week after leaving Fort Laramie, they make camp near a small stream lined with cottonwood trees. It's the most attractive campsite they've had in days, with plenty of grass for the animals and shelter from the constant wind. As they settle in for the night, Thomas notices a change in the air, a heaviness, a dampness that wasn't there before. "Storm coming," Harper confirms when Thomas mentions it. Weather changes fast in the foothills. Could be rain, could be snow. "Snow?" Thomas echoes, alarmed. "This early?" Harper shrugs. "Happens sometimes, probably just a dusting if it comes, but we should be prepared." They work quickly to secure the wagons, collecting extra firewood and making sure the animals are tethered where they'll have some shelter from the trees. By the time they finish, clouds have obscured the stars and the air feels decidedly colder. Thomas checks on Sarah one last time before turning in. She's bundled in blankets in the wagon, looking concerned. "I feel it too," she says when he mentions the weather. "Remember that freak September snow back in '39? Killed all the late crops." Thomas nods, remembering. "This is different country though. Harper says snow is normal here, even this early. Will it slow us down?" "Probably, but we'll manage." He tries to sound confident, though the prospect of snow in the mountains fills him with dread. They're racing against winter, and winter might be winning. He kisses her goodnight and settles into his bedroll beneath the wagon. Sleep comes slowly, his mind filled with worry about the days ahead. Sometime in the night, he wakes to an unnatural silence. The usual night sounds, insects, distant animals, the rustle of wind, are gone. Instead, there's only a soft, steady whisper, like countless tiny feet walking on the wagon cover above. Snow. Thomas rises quietly and steps out from under the wagon. The world has transformed. A thin blanket of white covers everything. The ground, the wagons, the trees. It's still falling, fat flakes drifting lazily in the still air. It's beautiful, in a way, peaceful, but Thomas feels only dread as he watches the snow accumulate. Every inch is another obstacle, another delay in their already tight schedule. "Just a dusting, huh?" he mutters to himself, thinking of Harper's prediction. As if summoned by the thought, the trail guide appears beside him, a dark shape in the swirling white. "Could be worse," Harper says quietly. "This is nothing compared to what the mountains can throw at us." "Comforting," Thomas says dryly. Harper chuckles. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow will be hard going." Thomas returns to his bedroll, but sleep eludes him now. He lies awake, listening to the soft sound of falling snow and wondering what new challenges the mountains will bring. Morning reveals 3 inches of snow covering the landscape, transforming the familiar trail into something alien and treacherous. The oxen balk at their harnesses, breath steaming in the frigid air. Thomas's fingers are already numb as he secures the last strap. "Think it'll melt?" William asks, stomping his feet to keep warm. Thomas looks at the sky. The clouds have thinned, allowing weak sunlight to filter through. Some of it, but we're still going to have a rough day. Rough doesn't begin to describe it. The snow turns the trail slick and muddy as the day warms. Wagon wheels sink into the muck, requiring extra oxen hitched to the front to pull them free. What should have been a 15-mile day stretches into an exhausting slog that covers barely 7 miles. By evening, everyone is mud-splattered and bone-tired. Sarah, still weak from her illness, looks ready to collapse when Thomas helps her down from the wagon. "I'm fine," she insists, but her pale face and trembling hands betray her. Captain Miller calls the wagon leaders together after supper. His expression is grim in the firelight. "At this pace, we won't reach South Pass for another 2 weeks, he says bluntly. "The snow up high will be getting deeper every day. We need to make a decision." "What kind of decision?" Thomas asks, though he already knows. Whether to push on or turn back to Fort Laramie while we still can. The words land like stones in still water. Turn back? After coming so far, the thought is almost unbearable. "What do you think, Harper?" Miller asks the guide. Harper pokes at the fire with a stick, considering. "Pass is still open now, according to those trappers we met yesterday." "But it's a gamble. Early winter like this, there's no telling when the real snow will hit. Could be a month from now, could be tomorrow. And if it hits while we're crossing?" someone asks. Harper doesn't sugarcoat it. "Then we're in real trouble. Wagons can't move through deep snow. Animals die, people die." A heavy silence falls over the group. Thomas thinks of the Donner Party trapped in the Sierra Nevada mountains the previous winter. The stories that had filtered back east were horrifying. "We've come too far to turn back," Thomas says finally. "My vote is to continue." Several others nod in agreement, but a few look uncertain. "Let's sleep on it," Miller decides. "Each family should discuss it tonight. We'll make the final decision in the morning." Back at their wagon, Thomas tells Sarah about the meeting. She listens without interrupting, her face thoughtful in the firelight. "The children could stay at Fort Laramie," she says when he finishes. "We could send them back with the families who are turning around. They'd be safe for the winter." Thomas stares at her, shocked. "Send them back? Without us?" "If it's too dangerous to continue, we stay together," he says firmly. "Whatever happens, we face it as a family." Sarah looks like she wants to argue, but instead she just nods. Then we go on. "But Thomas, we need to prepare for the worst. If we get caught in the mountains..." She doesn't finish the thought. She doesn't need to. They both know what's at stake. That night, Thomas can't sleep. He lies awake, listening to the breathing of his family and weighing impossible choices. Turn back and give up on the dream that's carried them this far. Continue and risk everything, perhaps even their lives. By morning, he's no closer to an answer. The wagon train gathers in the grey dawn light, faces solemn as Miller calls for a decision. In the end, 3 more families opt to turn back to Fort Laramie. The Masons and 5 other wagons will continue towards South Pass and beyond. Their already small train has dwindled to half its original size. The parting is emotional. These people have travelled together for months, sharing hardships and rare joys. They've helped birth babies, buried the dead, supported each other through illness and accident. Now they're splitting up, perhaps never to meet again. Mrs. Wilson, heading back to Fort Laramie, embraces Sarah with tears in her eyes. "Take care of yourself," she says. "Write to us when you reach Oregon." "We will," Sarah promises, though they both know how uncertain such promises are on the frontier. The journey resumes with a new urgency. They travel longer hours, pushing themselves and their animals to the limit. The landscape grows more dramatic, with each passing day towering cliffs, deep ravines, meadows that stretch to distant snow-capped peaks. In another context, it would be breathtakingly beautiful. Now it's just another obstacle to overcome. A week after the split, they reach South Pass. It's not what Thomas expected, no narrow gorge between towering peaks, but rather a broad, gently sloping valley that cuts through the mountains. It's deceptively easy terrain, but the elevation makes breathing difficult, especially for Sarah, who still hasn't fully recovered her strength. This is the Continental Divide, Harper explains as they make camp that night. Rain falling on this side goes to the Atlantic. On the other side, it flows to the Pacific. It's a milestone worth celebrating, but the mood is subdued. They've made it through the pass, but the hardest part of the journey still lies ahead. The descent into the Snake River Basin, then through the Blue Mountains, and finally down the Columbia to the Willamette Valley. How much farther? Emma asks that night, tracing the route on a crude map Harper has drawn in the dirt. About 700 miles, Harper tells her. Her face falls. That's still so far, but it's all downhill from here, he says with a wink. Well, mostly. The next morning brings clear skies and a group of mounted Shoshone waiting at the trail junction. There are 8 of them, men and women, wrapped in warm buffalo robes against the morning chill. Captain Miller and Harper ride out to meet them. The rest of the wagon train watches anxiously, rifles close at hand, despite Harper's assurances that the Shoshone are friendly. After a long conversation with Harper translating, Miller returns to the wagons. They're offering to guide us to Fort Hall, he explains. For a price, of course. Can we trust them? Someone asks. Miller looks offended on behalf of the Shoshone. These people have been guiding travellers for years. They know the trails better than anyone, and with the early snow, we need all the help we can get. In the end, they agree to hire 2 guides, a middle-aged man named Bear Runner and his nephew, a young man who introduces himself as Joseph in surprisingly good English. I learned at the mission school, Joseph explains when Thomas comments on it, before it burned. The Shoshone guides prove their worth immediately, showing the wagon train a shortcut that saves them nearly 2 days' travel. Joseph rides alongside the Mason wagon frequently, curious about their journey and eager to practice his English. Why Oregon? He asks Thomas. So far, so dangerous. Land, Thomas answers simply. A place of our own where we can build something that will last. Joseph considers this, then nods. My people understand. Land is life. But there's a sadness in his eyes that makes Thomas wonder how much longer the Shoshone will hold their own lands, with more settlers arriving every year. The weather holds as they descend from the high country into the Snake River plain. The snow melts away, replaced by a dusty landscape of sagebrush and scattered pine. It's warmer here, the air less thin, but the wind is constant and biting. Sarah continues to improve, now able to walk alongside the wagon for short periods. Her face is gaunt, but her eyes have their old sparkle back. Thomas finds himself watching her when she's not looking, still hardly believing how close he came to losing her. "Stop staring," she tells him one evening, catching him at it. "I'm not going to break." "I know," he says, but he keeps watching anyway. Fort Hall appears on the horizon after 5 days of hard traveller welcome sight, despite being much smaller than Fort Laramie. It's little more than a trading post, really, with a few rough buildings surrounded by a stockade fence, but it represents safety, supplies, and most importantly, information about the trail ahead. The news isn't good. An early blizzard has already dumped 2 feet of snow in the Blue Mountains. The main trail along the Snake River is flooded in sections from early snowmelt, and there are reports of hostile bands from other tribes in the region, taking advantage of the reduced military presence as winter approaches. "We should have turned back," one of the remaining wagon leaders mutters after hearing the reports. But it's too late for second thoughts now. Fort Hall is the last major outpost before Oregon. Going back would be almost as dangerous as continuing forward. That night, Thomas finds Joseph sitting alone by the fire, carving a small piece of wood with a sharp knife. "Is it really as bad as they say?" Thomas asks, settling beside him. Joseph shrugs. "Bad, yes. Impossible, no." He holds up the carving, a small bird taking shape under his skilled hands. "There is always a way, if you look hard enough. They say the Blue Mountains are already snowed in. Main trail, yes, but there are other ways." Joseph hesitates. "My people know these mountains. Many trails not on white man's maps." Thomas feels a spark of hope. "You know another route? Or maybe," Joseph eyes him thoughtfully, "why should I help? More white people coming means less land for Shoshone." It's a fair question, one Thomas has asked himself more than once. "I can't speak for all white settlers," he says finally, "but my family just wants a small piece of land to farm. We don't want to take more than we need." Joseph's expression suggests he's heard such promises before. $5, he says. "I show you safe path through mountains." 3, Thomas counters automatically, then feels ashamed for haggling over what could be his family's survival. But Joseph just grins. 4, he says, "and coffee. Deal." Thomas extends his hand and they shake on it. He doesn't tell the others about the arrangement yet. There's no guarantee Captain Miller will agree to follow an unmarked trail on the word of a young Shoshone, no matter how dire the alternatives. The next morning brings a new crisis. One of the remaining wagons, the Caldwells, tips over while crossing a small stream, spilling most of their supplies into the water. No one is injured, but the flour, sugar, and other staples are ruined. Without them, the family has no chance of completing the journey. "We'll share," Sarah says immediately when she hears the news. "Everyone can contribute a little." It's what they've always done on the trail, supported each other through disaster. But this time, with winter closing in and supplies already stretched thin, the others hesitate. "We barely have enough for ourselves," one of the men argues. "Then we'll have a little less," Sarah counters, her voice firm. "None of us makes it to Oregon alone." In the end, each family contributes something: a cup of flour here, a handful of coffee beans there, dried meat, salt, whatever they can spare. It's not enough to fully replace what was lost, but it will keep the Caldwells from starving before they reach the Willamette Valley. That evening, Thomas tells Sarah about Joseph's offer to guide them through the mountains. "Can he be trusted?" she asks, practical as always. "I think so, and honestly, what choice do we have? The main trail is already snowed in." Sarah considers this, then nods. "Talk to Miller. If he agrees, we'll follow Joseph." Captain Miller is skeptical at first. An unmarked trail through mountains already getting snow? "It's risky, Thomas." "Riskier than trying the main trail and getting stranded?" Miller can't argue with that logic. After a long discussion with Harper, who vouches for Joseph's knowledge of the terrain, he agrees to the plan. But, he adds, "we'll need to leave some things behind. Lighten the wagons as much as possible for mountain travel." "We already left half our belongings at Fort Laramie," Thomas protests. "And we'll leave half of what's left here," Miller says firmly. "Anything that's not essential for survival, we can come back for it in the spring if we make it through." It's another painful culling of their possessions. The rocking chair is long gone, but now they must leave behind Sarah's mother's china, Thomas's books, the children's toys, anything with sentimental rather than survival value. "It doesn't matter," Sarah says as they sort through their things. "All that matters is getting to Oregon alive." Thomas nods, but his heart aches as he watches their lives reduced to the bare essentials yet again. What will be left of them by the time they reach the Willamette Valley? They depart Fort Hall the following morning, their wagons noticeably lighter but their spirits heavy with the knowledge of what lies ahead. Joseph leads them northwest, away from the main trail, following what appears to be a game path through increasingly rugged country. "This doesn't look like a trail at all," William observes, riding beside Thomas on the wagon seat. "It's not to our eyes," Thomas replies, "but Joseph says his people have used it for generations." The path takes them through a narrow valley, then up a series of switchbacks to a ridge overlooking the Snake River. The view is spectacular, the great river winding through a vast plain, mountains rising in the distance, but Thomas has little attention to spare for the scenery. The trail here is barely wide enough for the wagons, with a sheer drop on one side. "Keep the oxen tight to the inside," he calls to William, who is leading their team. "One wrong step and we're over the edge." They make it safely across the ridge, but the day's journey has taken its toll. Everyone is tense, exhausted from the constant vigilance required on such difficult terrain. When they finally make camp for the night, no one has energy for more than the basic chores. "How much longer on this trail?" Thomas asks Joseph as they eat a simple supper of cornmeal mush and dried meat. 3 days to reach easier ground," Joseph replies, "if weather holds." Thomas glances at the sky. It's clear now, stars blazing overhead, but clouds are gathering on the northern horizon. "And if it doesn't hold?" Joseph follows his gaze and frowns. "Then we have trouble." The storm hits the next day around noon. Not snow this time, but a driving rain that turns the narrow trail to mud within minutes. The wagons slip and slide, threatening to go over the edge at every turn. They're forced to stop, huddling under makeshift shelters as the deluge continues. "We can't stay here," Miller says after 2 hours of waiting. "The trail will only get worse. We need to reach lower ground before dark." It's a dangerous gamble, but he's right. Up here, exposed on the mountainside, they're vulnerable not just to the weather, but to rock slides, which Joseph warns are common in heavy rain. So they press on, men walking beside each wagon to keep it from sliding off the trail, everyone soaked to the skin and shivering. Progress is agonizingly slow. By sunset, they've covered barely 3 miles. "There's a cave ahead," Joseph announces, riding back from his scouting position. "Big enough for people, not wagons. We shelter there tonight." The cave is actually a deep overhang in the cliff face, but it's dry and relatively warm once they build a fire near the entrance. The wagons remain outside, covered as best they can be, the oxen huddled miserably under trees nearby. Inside, families spread out their wet bedding to dry, everyone crowding close to the fire. It's cramped and uncomfortable, but better than being exposed to the continuing storm. "Tell us a story, Ma," Daniel begs as they settle in for the night. "A happy one." Sarah thinks for a moment, then begins a tale about a family of rabbits who build a wonderful home in a meadow. It's a simple story, one she's told before, but it takes on new meaning here, in this cave, with their own home still just a dream on the horizon. Thomas watches his wife and children, their faces glowing in the firelight. Despite everything, the illness, the hardships, the losses, they're still together, still pushing forward. The thought fills him with a fierce pride. The rain continues through the night but stops before dawn. They emerge from the cave to find the world transformed yet again. The storm has washed away much of the trail, leaving sections that will need to be rebuilt before the wagons can pass. It'll take most of the day, Miller says, after assessing the damage, and we still have to cross that. He points to a stream that has swollen to a rushing torrent overnight, cutting across their path about half a mile ahead. More delays, more obstacles. Thomas feels a familiar weight of worry settling on his shoulders. Every day spent here is another day for snow to build in the Blue Mountains, another day's supplies consumed, another day closer to winter. But there's nothing to do but face each challenge as it comes. So they set to work repairing the trail, cutting branches to reinforce muddy sections, building crude bridges over the worst washouts. By mid-afternoon, they've made enough progress to start moving the wagons again. The stream crossing proves even more difficult than expected. The water is knee-deep and fast-moving, with a treacherous rocky bottom. They double-team the oxen for each wagon, with men wading alongside to keep them on course. The mason's wagon is the third to cross. Thomas and William are in the stream, guiding the oxen when William loses his footing on a slippery rock. The current sweeps him off his feet immediately. William. Thomas lunges for his son, but the boy is already being carried downstream, his head barely above water. Without thinking, Thomas plunges after him, fighting against the current. He can hear Sarah screaming from the bank, can see the terror on William's face as he struggles to stay afloat. 20 yards downstream, William manages to grab onto a fallen tree that spans part of the stream. He clings there, coughing and sputtering as Thomas battles his way toward him. "Hold on!" Thomas shouts above the roar of the water. "I'm coming!" He reaches the tree and pulls himself along it until he can grab William's arm. The boy is pale with cold and fear, his clothes soaked and heavy. "I've got you," Thomas says, wrapping an arm around his son's chest. "Let go of the tree. I'll get us to shore." It takes all his strength to drag them both to the bank, fighting the current every inch of the way. By the time they stumble onto solid ground, Thomas is so exhausted he can barely stand. Sarah reaches them first, wrapping blankets around both of them, tears streaming down her face. "I thought I'd lost you," she says, clutching William tightly. "Both of you. It'll take more than a little stream to separate this family," Thomas manages to say through chattering teeth, but the close call has shaken him badly. That night, huddled around the fire, Thomas can't stop thinking about what almost happened. If William had been swept further downstream, if the fallen tree hadn't been there, if Thomas hadn't reached him in time. "Stop," Sarah says softly, reading his thoughts as she so often does. "They're safe. We're all safe." Thomas nods, but the fear lingers. They've been lucky, so far luckier than many on the trail. But how long will that luck hold? Joseph comes to sit beside them, his expression serious. 2 more days, he says. Hard travel, then easier road to Blue Mountains, but... He hesitates. "But what?" Thomas prompts. Joseph points to the northern sky, where clouds are building again. Snow coming. Big storm. Thomas feels a chill that has nothing to do with his still damp clothes. How soon? 2 days. Maybe 3. So it's a race now, their small wagon train against the approaching storm. If they can reach the valley before it hits, they have a chance. If not, Thomas meets Sarah's eyes across the fire and sees his own determination reflected there. They've come too far to turn back. Whatever happens, they'll face it together. The trail ahead seems to stretch endlessly into the gathering darkness, leading them toward whatever fate awaits in the mountains beyond. The storm is coming, Thomas can feel it in his bones, in the ache of old injuries and the strange stillness of the air. The animals sense it too. The oxen are restless. The milk cow refuses to stray far from the wagon. Even the birds have gone quiet, as if holding their breath. "How far to the valley?" Thomas asks Joseph as they break camp before dawn, stars still sharp in the clear sky. Or one day, maybe two. Joseph squints at the northern horizon where clouds are building like a distant mountain range. Not enough time. Thomas nods grimly. They won't outrun this storm. The best they can hope for is to find some kind of shelter before it hits. Captain Miller calls the wagon leaders together while the others finish loading. His face is etched with worry in the grey. What if you woke up tomorrow in America in the year 1900? No phone beside your bed, no running water, just the factory whistle screaming at 5 a.m. You're 12 years old, your hands are already bleeding from yesterday's work, and you've got 14 hours of textile mill ahead. Here's what life was really like in early 1900s America. Hey, quick thing before we start. If you actually listen to these regularly, hit like or subscribe. I always wonder where everyone's at, so comment your city and what time it is. Weird to think some of you are having breakfast in London while I'm recording this at night here in the States. Alright, let's head back to 1900. Trust me, it's going to be quite a ride. But first, get comfortable. Seriously, adjust those pillows. Pull up that blanket. Because where we're going, you're going to want to be cozy. Your eyes snap open in the dark. Not because you want them to. Because the factory whistle just ripped through the Lower East Side of Manhattan like a banshee. 5 o'clock, on the dot, every damn morning. The first thing that hits you is the cold. January in New York 1900. No central heating, no insulation, just you, your 2 younger siblings and a paper-thin blanket on a mattress stuffed with corn husks. Yeah, corn husks. They crackle every time you move, and after a few months they basically turn to dust. But hey, it's better than the floor. You're 12 years old. Your name is Giuseppe, but everyone at the factory calls you Joey. Your family came over from Italy 3 years ago. The American dream, right? Your little brother Marco is pressed against your back, stealing your body heat. He's 9. Too young for the factory, thank God. Your sister Anna, she's 7, curled up at your feet like a cat. The 3 of you share this mattress. Your parents sleep on another one across the room. That's generous. It's more like a box, maybe 10 feet by 12 feet. One window that faces a brick wall 6 inches away. The whole family lives here, eats here, exists here. The smell hits you next. It's complicated. There's the mildew from the walls that never quite dry out, the chamber pot in the corner that won't get emptied until someone makes the trip down 4 flights of stairs to the privy in the courtyard, the smell of unwashed bodies, because bathing means hauling water up those same 4 flights, heating it on the stove if you've got coal, and even then you're basically just moving the dirt around. But mostly, it's the smell of too many people in too small a space. The Kowalskis upstairs with their 6 kids, the O'Briens next door with their 5, the Goldsteins down the hall with their 8. This building, this 5-story walk-up on Orchard Street, it's got maybe 40 families crammed into it, 200 people, 4 toilets. You sit up, careful not to wake Marco and Anna. The corn husks protest. Your mother is already up. You can hear her in the darkness. The scratch of a match. The tiny flame illuminates her face for a second before she lights the kerosene lamp. She looks older than her 32 years. This place, this life, it ages you fast. Giuseppe, she whispers in Italian. Time to get up. Your feet hit the floor and immediately you regret it. The wooden boards are ice cold. There's frost on the inside of the window. Actually inside. You can see your breath in the lamplight. Not like your warm bed right now with its soft sheets and thermostat set to whatever perfect temperature you want. You pull on your work clothes, same ones as yesterday and the day before and the day before that. They get washed on Sunday if there's time, if there's soap, if there's energy left after 6 days of work. The shirt is more patches than original fabric at this point. Your mother's handiwork stitching and restitching with whatever scraps she can find. The pants are too short. You've grown 3 inches this year, but new clothes? That's not happening. Not when the whole family makes maybe $12 a week, if everyone's working, if no one's sick, if the factory doesn't cut hours. Your boots, God, your boots. They used to be your father's. The sole is separating from the leather, and you've stuffed newspaper inside to cover the holes. Your toes poke through anyway. In about an hour, when you're walking through the slush and horse manure of the streets, your feet will be soaked, and they'll stay that way for the next 14 hours. Your mother hands you breakfast, a heel of bread, hard as a brick, and a tin cup of something that might charitably be called coffee. It's mostly chicory and hot water, but it's warm, and that's what matters. You dunk the bread to soften it. Your back teeth hurt. No dentist for people like you. When teeth go bad, you live with it until you can't. Then you find someone with pliers. Papa already gone, you ask, though you know the answer. Hour ago, your mother says. Your father works at the docks, unloading ships. He leaves at 4 to be first in line for work. Some days he gets picked, some days he doesn't. When he doesn't, he comes home with empty hands and empty eyes. You gulp down the coffee water, kiss your mother's cheek. She smells like kerosene and exhaustion. Be careful, she says, like she does every morning. Like being careful is something you have any control over when you're working in a textile mill with machines that could rip your arm off if you zone out for even a second. You're at the door when Anna's voice stops you. Joey? She's awake, peering at you from the mattress. Bring home candy. You force a smile. Sure, Piccola. Candy. There hasn't been candy in months, but lies are free, and sometimes they're all you have to give. The hallway is darker than your apartment. No windows here. You feel your way to the stairs by memory, your hand sliding along the greasy wall. The Goldstein baby is crying somewhere. The O'Brien patriarch is coughing that wet tubercular cough that's been getting worse for weeks. Soon he won't be coughing at all. 4 flights down. Each step creaks. Some are rotting through. Mrs. Kowalski broke her ankle on these stairs last month. She still can't work. Her oldest boy, Stefan, he's 14. He's pulling double shifts to make up the money. The front door of the tenement opens onto Orchard Street, and the cold hits you like a physical thing. It's maybe 15 degrees. Your thin jacket might as well be made of paper, but at least you're outside, away from the suffocating closeness of the building. The street is already alive. This is the Lower East Side, the most densely populated place in the world. Yeah, the world. More people per square acre than Bombay, than London, than anywhere. Horse-drawn carts clatter over the cobblestones. Vendors are setting up their pushcarts, selling everything from rotting vegetables to suspiciously fresh meat. The smell of horse manure is everywhere. Frozen in some places, fresh and steaming in others. You step around a dead cat, or maybe it's a rat. Hard to tell in the pre-dawn darkness. The city doesn't clean these streets. Not down here. Not for people like you. Other kids are emerging from tenements, all heading the same direction. You recognize faces but don't know names. Polish kids, Jewish kids, Irish kids, Italian kids like you. All of you moving like a tide toward the factory districts. You fall into step with Tommy Flanagan from 2 buildings over. He's 13, been working at the mills for 3 years already. His left hand is missing 2 fingers, got caught in a loom last summer. The company gave him 2 days off, unpaid. Cold enough to freeze the balls off a brass monkey, Tommy says, his breath making clouds in the air. At least we're not at the coal mines, you say. It's true. Your cousin Salvatore, he's down in Pennsylvania, working the anthracite mines. He's 11, spends 12 hours a day in the dark, picking slate from coal. His letters, when he can get someone to write them, describe a special kind of hell. At least you see sunlight. Sometimes you pass a newsboy, maybe 8 years old, already hawking papers. Spanish flu spreading in Europe. Roosevelt demands reform 2 cents. Get your papers. Spanish flu. That's all you need, as if tuberculosis, cholera and diphtheria aren't enough. Disease spreads through the tenements like wildfire. Last summer, scarlet fever took 3 kids from your building in 1 week. The factory looms ahead, a 5-story brick monster belching black smoke into the dawn sky. The Anderson Textile Mill, your home for the next 14 hours, 6 days a week, 52 weeks a year, no vacation, no sick days, you stop working, you stop eating. Other kids are converging on the entrance, some as young as 7 or 8, though officially that's illegal now. Officially, the foremen don't check birth certificates. They check if your fingers are small enough to tie the threads, if you're short enough to crawl under the machines, if you're desperate enough to work for $3 a week. You're making $4 now, veteran wages for a 12-year-old. Your mother tells you to be proud you're contributing, you're helping the family survive. But survive for what? To wake up tomorrow and do it again? To watch your little sister's eyes go dead when she starts working next year? To end up like your father, 40 years old and looking 60, broken by labour that barely keeps you alive. The factory whistle screams again. 5:30. Time to clock in. You think about your bed right now, your actual bed, in your actual time. Warm, soft, safe, a phone beside it with an alarm you can snooze, a job that probably won't kill you, laws that say you can't work more than 40 hours without overtime. We won, eventually. Kids like Joey, like Tommy with his missing fingers, like all these small bodies filing into the factory in the freezing dawn. They fought and suffered, and some of them died, but they changed things. Child labour laws, safety regulations, the 8-hour workday. But that's all in the future. Right now, it's January 1900, and you're 12 years old, and the factory door is swallowing you whole. The foyer of the factory is slightly warmer than outside. Slightly. You can still see your breath, but at least the wind isn't cutting through your jacket anymore. The time clock stands against the wall like a judge. You get in line with the other kids, waiting your turn. The older workers are already inside. They get first punch. Adults, teenagers, anyone over 14 is considered senior staff. You watch them shuffle past, these men and women who look ancient but are probably only in their 30s. The mill ages you, strips years off your life with every breath of cotton dust, every hour hunched over machinery, every day without sunlight. Move it along, rats. That's Mr. Kowalski, the floor supervisor. No relation to your upstairs neighbours, just another Polish name in a city full of them. He's massive, 6 feet tall and built like a brick wall. The kind of man who got his job by being meaner than everyone else. His favourite thing is his stick, a 3-foot piece of oak he uses to encourage faster work. You punch your card. 5:31 a.m. 1 minute late, that's a penny off your wages. Doesn't matter that you've been standing in line. Doesn't matter that there's only one time clock for 200 workers. Late is late. The main floor of the mill hits you like walking into a wall. The noise is incredible. Hundreds of power looms running at once, all of them clattering and banging and shrieking. You'll be deaf by 40. Everyone is. Your grandfather back in Italy, he was a farmer. Lived to 70 with his hearing intact. Here, different story. The cotton dust is already thick in the air. It's like fog, but fog that gets in your lungs and never comes out. Mill workers' cough, they call it. Everyone has it. That dry, hacking sound that follows you home, keeps you up at night, gets worse every year until it doesn't. The heat from the machines is starting to build. In an hour, it'll be sweltering in here. In summer, kids pass out from the heat. In winter, you go from freezing to broiling to freezing again when you leave. Your body never adjusts, it just endures. You make your way to your station. You're a doffer now, which is a step up from being a sweeper. Sweepers are the youngest kids, the ones who crawl under the running machines to clean out the cotton fibres. Every week someone gets their hair caught, or their hand, or worse. As a doffer, your job is to remove the full bobbins from the spinning frames and replace them with empty ones. Sounds simple. It's not. The machines don't stop. Ever. You have to dart in, grab the full bobbin, swap it for an empty one, all while the machinery is spinning at hundreds of rotations per minute. One wrong move, 1 second of distraction. You think about Tommy's missing fingers. Joey, you awake or what? That's Marie, the Irish girl who works the frame next to yours. She's 11, been here 2 years. Red hair that she keeps tied back tight ever since she saw Lucy Brennan get scalped when her braids got caught in a gear. Yeah, I'm awake, you say, taking your position. The frames stretch out in long rows, each one a monument to progress. That's what the owners call it. Progress. These machines can do the work of 100 hand spinners. They just need children to tend them. Small fingers for delicate work, short bodies that don't need to be paid adult wages. You start your routine, watch the bobbins fill with thread, wait for the exact moment, dart in, swap, dart out, repeat for 14 hours. Within minutes, you're sweating despite the cold morning. The work is constant. No sitting, no stopping. If Mr. Kowalski catches you idle, that's a crack with his stick. Or worse, you're fired, and there's a line of kids outside waiting to take your place. The cotton fibres float through the air like snow. Pretty, if it wasn't killing you. You tie your handkerchief over your nose and mouth, but it doesn't help much. By the end of the day, when you blow your nose, it'll be black. Around you, the mill is a symphony of misery. Kids coughing, machines screaming, supervisors shouting, and underneath it all, the constant clack, clack, clack of the looms, like a giant clock counting down the hours of your childhood. This isn't like your job. Your job probably has breaks, labour laws, someone making sure you don't die on the clock. Here, you're not a person. You're a part of the machine, a replaceable part. Heads up. You look over to see little Michael O'Malley struggling with a full bobbin. He's 8, shouldn't even be here, but his father died in a construction accident last month and his mother needs the money. The bobbin is almost as big as he is. You want to help him, but you can't leave your station. That's another penny gone, another step closer to your family not eating. So you watch as he wrestles with it, his small arms shaking with the effort. This is childhood in 1900. Not school, not playing, not growing up safe and loved. This. But you know what? These kids like Joey and Marie and little Michael, they're tougher than anyone gives them credit for. They're surviving something that would break most people. And some of them, not many, but some, they're going to grow up and change things. In 20 years, some of these mill children will be union organisers. In 30 years, they'll be pushing through Congress the laws that end child labour. In 40 years, they'll be making sure their own children never see the inside of a factory. But that's the future. Right now, it's 6 a.m. in a textile mill in New York City, and you're 12 years old, and you've got 13 and a half more hours to go. 6:30 now. The mill's fully alive. Every machine running, every worker at their station. The cotton dust is already thick enough that you can barely see the far wall. Your throat's starting to scratch. That familiar burn. Marie leans over between bobbin changes. You hear about the Murkowski girl? You shake your head. Hands still working, always working. Caught her hair yesterday. Second shift. Marie's voice is flat, matter of fact. pulled half her scalp off before someone hit the emergency stop. The emergency stop, right, the one that takes 4 men and a crowbar to actually engage. The one that costs the company $5 in lost production every minute it's down. The one they only use if someone's actually dying, and sometimes not even then. She alive, you ask? Yeah, but she ain't coming back. No workers' compensation in 1900. You get hurt, you're done. Your family better hope someone else can work, or it's the poorhouse. Or worse, 7 o'clock. Your fingers are already raw from the cotton fibres. They're like tiny needles working their way under your fingernails into every cut and scrape. By the end of the day, your hands will be bleeding. They always are. Little Michael O'Malley is struggling again. The kid's too small for this job. Even by child labour standards, you watch him trying to reach a high bobbin, standing on his tiptoes, wobbling. Then it happens. His sleeve catches. Michael, but your shout is swallowed by the machine noise. The spinning frame starts pulling him in. His eyes go wide, pure terror. Without thinking, you abandon your station and dive for him. You grab his other arm and pull hard as you can. The machine's stronger, but you've got desperation on your side. The sleeve tears. Michael falls backward, lands on you. You both hit the floor hard. He's crying, but he's got all his parts. That's what counts. What the hell is this? Mr. Kowalski towers over you both, his stick raised. His sleeve got caught, sir. The stick comes down on your shoulder. Pain explodes down your arm. You left your station. That's 2 pennies. And you? He points the stick at Michael. Stop crying or you're out. Michael chokes back his sobs. He's 8 years old. This is what progress looks like in 1900. This is what's building America into an industrial powerhouse. The tears of 8-year-olds, the blood of 12-year-olds, the broken bodies of anyone too poor to be anywhere else. 7:30. Your shoulders throbbing, but you keep working. You can't afford to slow down. The bobbins don't care if you're hurt. New girl starts today. Can't be more than 7. She's with the sweepers, crawling under the machines with a brush and pan. Her mother's working 3 rows over, keeping one eye on her daughter while trying to maintain her own quota. The girl's name is Sophia. Greek family just off the boat. She doesn't speak English yet, but she doesn't need to. The machines speak a universal language: work or starve. You watch her crawl under a running loom, inches from mechanisms that could crush her skull like an egg. Her mother's hands are shaking as she works. First day is always the hardest. After that, you just go numb. 8 o'clock, 2.5 hours in, 11.5 to go. Your back is screaming. The human body isn't meant to stand in one position for 14 hours, making the same repetitive motions. You're 12. Your spine is still growing. In 10 years, you'll be permanently hunched like half the adult workers here. But hey, at least you're not at your desk job right now, complaining about your ergonomic chair not being quite right. Joey, Marie hisses. Kowalski's coming. You speed up your movements. Look busy. Always look busy. Even when there's nothing to do, find something. Idle hands don't just do the devil's work here. They get you fired. Kowalski stalks past, his stick tapping against his palm. He stops at Sophia's mother, watches her for a moment, then moves on. She exhales. We all do. 8:30. Someone's throwing up. You can hear it over the machines, which means it's bad. Probably heat exhaustion, even though it's January. The mills are like ovens. All that machinery generating heat, nowhere for it to go. It's a Polish boy, maybe 10. He's on his hands and knees, heaving. The cotton dust makes everyone sick eventually, but some faster than others. Get him out, Kowalski shouts, and dock his pay for the clean-up. 2 older workers drag the boy toward the door. He won't be back. Can't show weakness here. There's 100 kids outside who won't throw up on the floor. 9 o'clock. Break time, someone shouts. Break time. That's funny. You get 15 minutes to use the bathroom, get water, and eat if you brought anything. 15 minutes for 200 workers and 4 toilets. The rush for the privies is insane. Kids are literally fighting to get in line. You've learned to hold it. Better to wait for the afternoon break than waste your entire 15 minutes in line. Instead, you head for the water barrel. It's lukewarm and tastes like metal, but your throat is coated with cotton dust and you need it. You gulp it down, knowing you'll pay for it later when you need to pee and can't leave your station. Marie's beside you, unwrapping a small bundle, half a potato and a slice of bread that's more mould than wheat. Want some? She offers. You shake your head. You're hungry, but not that hungry. Yet. She shrugs and eats it anyway. When you're poor, you don't waste food. Even mouldy food. Your stomach's already destroyed from all the crap you've eaten over the years. What's a little more damage? You hear Roosevelt might run for president, she says between bites. Yeah? Says he'll bust up the trusts, make things better for workers. You want to laugh, but it would hurt your throat. Politicians have been promising to make things better since before you were born. Yet here you are, 12 years old, working in a textile mill for pennies while men in New York mansions light cigars with dollar bills. Maybe, you say, because what else can you say? Hope is all some of us have. 9:15, back to work. The frames seem louder after the break, or maybe it's just that you got used to the relative quiet for 15 minutes. Your ears are ringing. They always are these days. Sometimes at night, lying on your corn husk mattress, the ringing is all you can hear. New problem. One of your bobbins is jamming. The thread keeps breaking. If you can't fix it, production slows. If production slows, Kowalski comes over. If Kowalski comes over, you try to retie the thread, but your fingers are shaking. Exhaustion, hunger, fear, all of it making your hands unsteady. Here, it's Stefan, the Kowalski boy from your building, not the supervisor, the other one. He's 14, been working here since he was 8. His fingers move like lightning, fixing the thread in seconds. Thanks, you whisper. He nods and moves back to his station. Small kindnesses, that's how you survive here. Looking out for each other when the bosses aren't watching. 9:45. Something's happening at the far end of the floor. Commotion, shouting, then the sound everyone dreads. A scream, cut short. The machines don't stop. They never stop. But everyone's looking now, trying to see what happened. Word travels fast in the mill, whispered from station to station like a telegram. Brennan's boy, hand caught in the gears. Brennan's boy, Timothy. He's 10, was 10. You can see them carrying something out, something covered in a bloody sheet, something too small to be a whole person. Everyone goes back to work. What else can you do? Stop and mourn? That's a penny off your wages. Get angry? That's your job gone. So you work, and you try not to think about Timothy Brennan, who was 10 years old and had a little sister named Ruth, who's probably going to have to take his place here next week because the family needs the money. This is America in 1900, the land of opportunity, the golden door, the place where streets are paved with gold. Yeah, gold mixed with the blood of 10-year-olds. 10 o'clock, 4.5 hours down. Your hands are bleeding now, right on schedule. The cotton fibres have worked their way through your calluses. You wipe the blood on your pants and keep going. Sophia, the new Greek girl, is crying under the machines. Silent tears because noise gets you fired. Her hands are black with machine oil and cotton dust. She doesn't understand why she can't go home. Doesn't understand that this is home now. 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. Her mother can't go to her, can't comfort her, can't do anything but watch and work and pray her daughter survives long enough to get used to it. You remember your first day. You cried too. Everyone does. Then you learn that tears don't change anything. They just make it harder to see the machines that are trying to kill you. Hey kid, you call out to Sophia next time she crawls past. You say it's soft, so Kowalski won't hear. She looks up at you with huge brown eyes. You don't share a language, but you pull out the piece of hard candy you've been saving for 3 weeks, the one you were going to give to Anna. You toss it to her. She catches it, confused. You mime putting it in your mouth. She understands, pops it in. Her eyes go wide. Sugar. Probably the first sweet thing she's had in months. It's nothing. A piece of candy. But for a second, she almost smiles. Marie sees what you did. That was for your sister. Yeah. You're an idiot, Joey. Yeah, but we both know I did the right thing. Because if we don't help each other, if we don't hold on to some scrap of humanity,